Welcome back to the Nullified Take channel here on YouTube, where we've got the TNT takes on a brand new show here on the channel, The Wheel of Time. I am your host, Chris, as usual, and I'm joined by a brand new, fresh, beard-faced man here on the screen, Mr. Will himself. We've been friends for a long time. We've spoken about this for a while, Will, and it's so great to finally make this happen. You're on the channel to talk Wheel of Time with us. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm appreciating the fresh statement. Fresh to the pod. Definitely not feeling fresh. Probably not looking it, but we're here.
Oh, well, so happy to have you on the channel. I mean, at the end of the day, I couldn't think of anybody else to do Wheel of Time recaps with, because you're someone that is a fan of the books. You've read them before. I know you're putting that pressure on you, saying that you're a fan of the books, maybe a lot of pressure, because this seems to be a very passionate fandom when it comes to Wheel of Time, but you kind of put me a little bit at ease before we went live, because I said to you I'm nervous doing this show because it's not my normal wheelhouse. But you said that the fandom, they're a friendly bunch out there.
Oh, very friendly. And yeah, definitely not an expert. There's 14 odd books. You know, there's a lot of content there, and to try and have your finger on the pulse for everything would just be a bit too hard. But yeah, do my best. Try as I may. Definitely a fan. One of my tattoos, I got a Wheel of Time tattoo.
Oh wow!
So yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Just part of my. I've got the.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's one of my.
That's really cool on the arms.
So. Yeah.
So you're an even bigger fan than what I even realized coming into this thing. Because if you're getting a tattoo of it on you, then you know that's next level fandom. I don't have tattoos of Survivor, and I'm a big Survivor fan. You know.
Yeah, no. So I've got little geeky things all over my arms. I got a Harry Potter, a Naruto, a Gandalf. Like it's a bit of all sorts. So I had to have one time in there as well.
Love it. Well, let's say hello to everybody here in the live. You know, Andre Lee dropping at $10, and for those who don't know, Andre Lee is the person that he's the reason that Wheel of Time is on this channel, because Andre Lee asked for it to be on the channel, and I said to him, I personally do watch the show. I've read the first book because the first season inspired me to go and read the books. I've known about the books for a long time because one of my best friends in school used to read it way back in the day, like back in the early 2000s, read the books and always tried to get me onto it. But Andre Lee is the reason that we brought the show here, because he loves it, and he's been such a big part of the channel. And as we grow the channel, I want to make sure that we listen to the audience when it comes to bringing new shows onto the channel. So who knows, next time maybe one of your shows will feature on this podcast next. So, you know, make sure to jump on, subscribe to the channel, and be with us on this journey. But Andre Lee, $10 there, saying, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Dovi Andi Setovia Sagem, which is Old Tongue. And I had to research this, Andre Lee. You made me do some research here in the early stages of this podcast. It's Old Tongue for it's time to toss the dice, which Matt usually says in the books, right, Will?
The ultimate gambler. Yeah.
Ultimate gambler. And I've always been told by my friend who used to read the books back in the day, he said that if you read the books, you would love Matt. He's like, Matt would be the type of character you'd love. And I'm enjoying Matt, even though we've had two different actors play it so far for various reasons on the show. I've enjoyed his character. We've seen limited Matt so far in the first 2 episodes. And I should also state that this recap and review is only about the first 2 episodes, because, you know, the 3rd episode has already dropped. We'll do 3 and 4 next week. We're planning on doing 4 sort of lives about each one of these episodes moving forward. So please don't spoil us for episode 3, if that's possible.
Matt is definitely a character you like. I read it like late 90s, early 2000s. I was maybe 14, 15. And Matt was definitely one of those ones that sung to you at that point. But as you read it, as you get older, and as I've got older, I found different characters I've related to in different stages of my life. Does that make sense? And Matt was definitely one right at the get-go. When you're a bit younger, you're like, yeah, man, this guy's cool. Definitely going to be interesting to see how his character arc rolls. And the spoiler session, with Chris not having read the books, I wouldn't want to spoil for him either what's going to happen. So basically, we'll just sort of touch base on what's happening within the stories and possibly how it's sort of changed and gone sideways, or how it's completely altered how certain characters are introduced and their arcs, without spoiling the book. Or I can't do the series because I haven't watched any further than the first 2 episodes.
So watching the series, like I said, and we're going to get into what happened here in the season very soon. Watching the series, the first season, I didn't have any background about the books. I didn't read them. I really enjoyed the first season. I know there were people who read the books who were in two minds about it, which it's always difficult when you do an adaptation of a book and you try and put it onto a TV show for it to translate well, because the book just has so much more opportunity to do world building, character building. You would find it difficult to fit all of that into like 8 or 10 episodes in the season. Can you at least tell that this show is being made by someone who loves Wheel of Time? Like, did you?
100%. So I see. It's interesting you talk about some loved it, some hated it. Me being a huge fan of the book series for years, even all the changes I love, because I'm just super excited and pumped by the fact that it's getting a series. It was one of those books that, leading up to all the extra money going into TV series, you're like, it could never be made effectively in a movie. And you just never imagined it would get the TV series that it has now, and also be able to build on the world like it is. So for me, I don't mind all the changes, because I'm just excited to see that the world is being portrayed as it is. My wife, who read the books leading up to the series, was a bit annoyed more, because she was still new to the books and was still a bit miffed about the fact that they'd changed it. But for me, I was just pumped to see that they'd actually released the series, and they've tried. And I was following it all the way through COVID as they were releasing all of the different castings. Now, Rafe may be someone that you're familiar with, Chris, because he's the showrunner and the writer, and he was a huge Survivor. Did he win one of the Survivor? And then he also went on as a producer for Survivor later on. Is that right?
Well, he actually ended up third place in the season that he was on. So, spoiler alert for those that haven't seen Rafe. And he was a phenomenal Survivor player. I sort of found out that he was working on this series called Wheel of Time, and then put 2 and 2 together that this was the same series that one of my mates in school always tried to get me onto. But, obviously he's someone that is really, in love with the franchise itself. He's read all the books. I do think he's passionate about giving us the best possible show. And that's why I asked, could you tell that it's being made out of love, out of passion for the books? And that's good that you have said that, yes, that he's doing the best that he can with the limited resources. By the way, looking at the second season compared to the first season, you can tell that the budget's been upped a little bit, right? Everything looks a little bit better to me.
I don't see the budget. I don't know if it's changed much. The issue with season 1 was COVID hitting halfway through the filming. So what it was, when they tried to bring cast back to do reshoots, they couldn't shoot it in the same location. So they had to change and alter. They had to change character arcs just for that season, because they couldn't do it like they'd planned. Speaking of people that they've got involved to help with the series, Harriet, who was Robert Jordan's wife, who was his editor, has been brought on as a consultant, as well as Brandon Sanderson, who finished the last 2 books after Robert Jordan passed away. So he's also helped with the consultation. So they've both been heavily involved in making sure that the series is as true as can be within the restrictions of a TV series. The book is immense. It is massive. And if they tried to introduce as many characters as introduced in the book, you'd be lost. You'd be watching going, and who was that again? Who was that? It's just, they need to.
I can imagine.
Yeah. It's exciting.
It's hard.
And Amazon Prime, thank you for having the move your mouse and you can see the names of who the people are popping up, because that just went, that's who that character is. Yeah. Yeah,
I've
that's
used
exciting.
that little that functionality. I do want to read some of the comments here. Lena says yes, very
Yes.
friendly fandom. Lena says, will there be spoilers for in the session? I'm a non-book reader, but loved season one. I'm a non-book reader. Well, I've read the first book, but we won't spoil anything that we haven't seen in the books. But we'll just talk about. And I think in roundabout ways, we may have Will saying, well, this is, I think, what they're trying to do here or there, but without giving too much away.
I will try my
Georgette,
very best not to. Maybe I'll have a fine box or a fine something or other if I accidentally let something slip.
Yeah, Georgette is saying, hey peeps, I'll give it a shot. Yeah, definitely you should. Andre Lee is very happy about the fact that we're doing this. Season 2 matters the math that he knows. Lena coming in with the super stick of $5. Thank you so much, Lena. And then PKGGNZ, my boy Prince in the chat with a $5 New Zealand as well, saying good stuff. Happy to have you here. Dolores saying, I saw season 1, never read the books. I'm debating if I should read it. I went into reading the book, and there was a lot of differences in the flow of the story when I read the first book. And certain characters are introduced earlier in the books than what they're being introduced to us in the show. But kind of for the reasons like Will just said, I think it is very difficult to put it all together and do it in a way that actually makes sense for a TV audience. But definitely good. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Andre Lee with a bit of a hot take, right? Because he's just gone now, right? We haven't seen him at all.
No.
And he's a big character in the books.
Huge character. But that is also partly the change of arc that happened from season 1 in the book too. The story with Tom completely went off. And we can talk about that as we go through, because there's another character that's introduced in episode 2 who has quite a main part of the book, of first book. So we can talk a little bit about that as well.
100%. Well, let's start off here in episode 1. We start off with a scene which was quite an interesting one, of a little girl being outside in the wild. There's Trollocs that are chasing her into this house. And then when she gets into this house, she's there in a room with a bunch of, what do they call them? Is it like Forsaken, the people that are sitting around the table?
No. So in the books, they often have meetings of dark friends, and they're generally the higher up ones, especially. Now, Ishamael, who's played by Faris, fantastic actor, who was portrayed as the Dark One at the end during season 1. He is a Forsaken, or a Chosen, as the Dark Friends call themselves. And he was essentially what they say is one of the closest Forsaken to the edge of the seals, the lock. So when Rand at the end of season 1 broke the seal, broke the eye of the world, essentially, he was the first one released properly.
Right.
Yeah, and so he's there, and he's having a meeting with some dark friends. And there are, as we watch,
so he's above. Sorry, and there's going to be a lot of questions from.
No. Please go for gold.
I feel like there's a lot that,
as much as I can.
Yeah, because I feel like there's a lot we don't know, and that they're not holding our hands at this stage either.
No.
And I'm sure it's going to get revealed down the line. There's a reason everybody's got the cloaks on, because there's going to be some familiar faces down the line that are sitting there that we don't know about today. Like I'm speculating that there's going to be some shocks for us in the future on who is sitting at that table.
Notes, and I paused as soon as I could underneath as the we go.
Yeah.
But no, so going back to your first question, the Forsaken, Ishamael, is one of a few of the Forsaken that are in the book. They are channelers, and they were like the creme de la creme of channelers. That followed.
But Ishamael sits above them, right? He's like a lieutenant, and was he one of them? Is he a part of
that's what the Chosen were. They were all like the generals for the Dark One.
Right.
They were like the group of, and they were all fighting essentially to be the biggest one, to be the top general. Do you know what I mean? So like you've got the Dark One, and then they're all fighting. Yeah. These ones at the table, as Certified Soft is saying, are just the Dark Friends. They're just certain key Dark Friends that are placed around the community or within the different communities. That I think, like you say, Padan Fain was there. He showed his face. They generally try and keep themselves secret, but there were definitely some clues as to who different people were. Yeah.
So already Easter eggs being put in there that we, the casual fans, probably don't know about. Certified Soft also says, can we talk about how Loial, just like it wasn't even stabbed in the finale and is alive and well? So what's happening here? Well, you're going to have to explain to me.
So Loial was one of the few that was stabbed right at the end of season 1. And we were all like, he's Lyle is one of my favorite characters, and the fact that he was stabbed at the end of season 1 by Pat and Fane and the Dark Friends as they were stealing the Horn of Valia freaked me out. Uno, Uno and Ingdar, and that who were also part of getting the Horn of Valia out, were all stabbed and ran off, and essentially the only one left still standing at that point was Perrin, and that was how season 1 ended. So we were just like, no. But thankfully, yeah, like they say, it's like nothing's happened. But time has passed, and that's something we find later on. 5 months has passed since that all took place, so that's why they probably look fresh and healthy, because they've been healed and they've had time to rest.
Yeah, they're all in different spots. They've all split up as well. And Sudovitsov said that she thinks it's important that they did that with Pat and Fane, since the story has changed with him and his storyline. So there's obviously some reasons coming into this. But the girl here, interesting scene in the beginning, you know, with her going in there with, you know, her walking out with Ishamael. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
That's
to the Trollocs.
Yeah.
Learning that they're half beast, half, you know, not beast or human, I think it was, or something like that. And he's like working on her to trust the beast, sort of. It's almost like he's training her to become. And this is the other thing with this. They didn't make it clear if this timeline that we're seeing this in, is it from the past or the future? I've got a feeling, could this be from the past and this girl is actually all grown already? Or how big of a significance does this girl play in the books?
I don't know about the girl. The girl.
It's just a random scene.
Yeah, for sure. Before I realized it was Ishamael, because at the start, during season 1, they didn't actually specify that it was Ishamael, and then when I saw that, because I rewatched the end of episode 8 earlier on this week, and they actually had that scene cut to the end of it. And so when I was watching, I was like, "Oh, is it Agenor?" Because Agenor was another Forsaken, and he actually created the Trollocs. He was the creator of the Trollocs and a lot of the Dark Friends. Right. So when he walked up and sort of patted him, I was like, "Oh, it's Agenor," Agenor was one of the first Forsaken in the books that was released. So I was like, "Oh, okay, it's Agenor." And then I moved and I'm like, "Oh no, it's Ishamael." Okay, never mind. Maybe they've combined the two of them just to try and save on characters, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the wee girl ran inside and to the table, hid underneath. So under that table, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on there.
All went over my head. Like I've got no idea.
So first of all, you had the lady or the man with the massively long nails.
Yes,
that's a High Lord from the Sanchin, and they came in at the end of episode 8 as well. They were that big, you know, the little girl that was on the beach, and then the big wave came through. So that's an invading force of Sanchin, and that were the nails. Yes, those nails are amazing. And that was also one we're just like, how are they going to portray that in the show? So they did that straight away. Big long nails was one of the people at the table. So we now know that there's at least one dark friend or dark friends amongst the Sanchin. You had the Aes Sedai ring, the Black Aja, that confirmed it straight away that Aes Sedai have a Black Aja. So there's lots of different colored Aja, and they talk a little bit about that in this series, the first 2 episodes.
Yeah,
that straight away
we kind of get introduced to the blue, the green, and the red Aja in the first one, and then the 2 ladies that are with Moraine for the majority of this season, their previous brown Aja. That's what I've sort of picked up. Yeah.
Yes.
And then there's a black Aja, which
and there's grey, yellow, green. We've talked about green, grey and yellow as well, and white. So and the Black Aja was always whispered about, but was never confirmed. And straight away, start of season 2, they've confirmed definitely there's Black Aja there, and with the ring and the glove. The other one, which caught me until later on in the series episodes, was there was a straight cloth with a bird on it. And I saw that. Like, I was trying to Google that. I was like, where is that from? I'm trying to remember. It's the Shienaran. So later on, they have the Shienarans wearing the same type of cloaks, outfits with the same bird on it. So I'm like, sweet, there we go. There we got Pat and Fane, and the other one, which was linked, I think, to the girl, which was was the multicolored dress. Wow. Now there's the travelers in the multicolored dress, and I was like, okay, so maybe this is one of the travelers who's part of it, which is part of the Way of the Leaf. Maybe, I'm not sure. That was speculation. All from one little quick scene.
Wow, it only took us 20 minutes to go through the first scene of the two
Yes.
episodes that we've seen. So I'm sure this is going to be a very quick podcast today. No, but listen, that's crazy that they were able to put so many little Easter eggs in there for people that enjoyed the book. Obviously, for myself watching it, I thought it was a very innocent scene. You've enlightened me to a lot of additional things that happened there. But I think it's going to be important moving forward in the show, because there's going to be some, again, like I said, some of those people that are sitting there cloaked, masked up, there's going to be some people there that are going to be probably shocking to us as an audience down the line when they get revealed. I'm going to be like, wow, I didn't realize that this person was part of the Dark Fiends. So that just to me sounds like good storytelling 101. That something like that's going to happen down the line.
And that's probably what it is, a bit of foreshadowing. And like you said, we don't actually know when that table meeting happened. And certified soft, multicolored dress, the tankers, yes. And they were introduced in the first season as well.
Right.
With Aram and Egwene and Perrin coming across them after their escape from Shadar Logoth. So, yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Moraine journey of it all here through the first episode. We're going to go to a place that looks like it's somewhere in a rocky, mountainous scene. We see Moraine walking and collecting water, going back to this house that she's staying in and dealing with the fact, and a lot of the first two episodes is going to deal with the fact that Moraine has been cut off from the source here. What do they call it? The weave. And she can't
been stilled.
Yeah, and she doesn't have the ability to use her magic anymore, which has been such a big part of who she is, who she identifies with. And you also see at the same time, you can see Lan out there as well, also dealing with his own struggles and the fact that he's training, and he also now feels kind of cut off to her, because the relationship between Lan and Moraine is a very complicated one. As a ward, he's supposed to be protecting her. She's got the magic. She doesn't have that anymore. So because of that, even their connection is being put under strain at this point in the story.
The connection's gone.
Cut.
They don't have the bond anymore, because as soon as she's she's essentially no longer an Aes Sedai, because of the fact that she's been cut from the source. And just to provide that never happens in the books. She's not cut in the book one anyway. Never cut from the source. That's a completely new arc that Moraine is going through, partly because she doesn't appear in the second book basically at all, and they won't want to have this lead actress who's also
biggest name recognition
and a producer on the show not having something to do. In the book, she's basically off doing research, and the whole book follows the rest, the kids, the Two Rivers crew.
Right. So what do you think about this storyline that they're introducing to us here with Moraine going through this?
I think it's really interesting. She does in the book go to some Aes Sedai to learn more information, which is true to the book, but it's not Viren. Viren's introduced in a different way in the book. But the fact that in this it is Viren makes sense, because they need to introduce Viren. Viren's a key character throughout the series as well as her water as well. So it makes sense that they've introduced that. An interesting thing and Viren mentions it in episode 2, is often Aes Sedai that get cut from the source, they die. If they don't have another focus to focus in on, to deep dive into. Some they talk about they'll get married and have children, so they've got something else to focus on. But any that end up lost end up dying. And warders, once they get cut off from their Aes Sedai, will often go off on a journey to die. They will go off into the blight and just kill until they are killed, and they'll do as much damage to the dark ones and to the dark friends and as much to the dark side as possible before they die themselves, because they've basically had their whole thing cut out as well. So it's interesting that they've got this mission going on at the moment to try and find more information. That whole dynamic that's going on is really interesting. Moiraine trying to train, like walking the buckets every day, and that's alluded to. How she's doing it every day to strengthen is interesting. She's trying to find a cause to keep herself going, because at this point, and there's like in books, as far as the current Aes Sedai are aware, you can't heal stilling. You can't.
And they talk about that. They talk about that in the show as well, that when you're cut off, you can't get it back. But we know that at some point, she's probably, if she never lost it, she's going to gain it back. She's going to get a way to get it back. And she invites someone to come over Master Domin, I believe it is, to come over to her. And how big of a character is Master Domin? Is there a significance?
He just before we get to that point, Andre Lee asked a question here as well. He says, have they given another character storyline to Moiraine? Possibly. We'll see how that transpires. I don't want to give any clues away or any other things away, but there is definitely an Aes Sedai importance in the book that does get stilled. And yes, Bail Domon he's awesome. To finally have him, he should have been in season 1. Yes, he really should have been. In the books, Matt, Rand, and Tom, as they're running away from Shadar Logoth, get to a river, and then the boat comes by, and they basically just jump onto this barge that's going down the river, and it's Bail Damon's boat. So that introduced right there and then they all ride.
So I would have read about this already because I remember that actually. Yeah,
and they ride all the way down with them to Whitebridge, and that's where they get off, and that's where Tom departs as well after an incident with a Fade, and that's where Rand and Matt go on their journey and then so it is definitely different, but I'm very pleased to see Bail Domon was introduced, and how he was introduced was interesting, true to form, because he was a collector of the Heartstone in the books as well, so that links. And I loved, on my episode 2 notes, the little dig that Moiraine does on the bartering there was just fantastic.
I was going to mention that as well. It was a highlight in how she played him for that, and just making it sound like she's after the Heartstone when in actuality she's always going to be after the letter.
Yeah, and Aes Sedai taught the sea folk how to haggle. It was just like, oh, brilliant. And yes, Andre, Tom should have been in from Edmund's Field as well. 100% should have been traveling with them.
All right. At this point, the show goes into White Tower. We get to see Egwene, and we see where she's ended up. She's with the Aes Sedai. There was they were alluding to that happening in season 1, that she had great magical potential and that she would work with them and become an Aes Sedai herself. But with her as well is Nynaeve. And this is an interesting dynamic that they're sort of working with, I guess, within it's kind of hard not to talk about both episodes as one, because the overarching storyline is seeing Nynaeve being stubborn, and she's got the potential, which I forgot that she was so much stronger, or the potential to be so much stronger than Egwene. She's got 10 times the potential of Egwene if she embraces the power that she has. And they're trying to teach her how to do a simple trick here of turning muddy water into clear water for her to be able to drink it.
That was such a cool scene. Nynaeve,
because her drinking the muddy water, or the trying to
just the bossing it out. Like, you didn't say, you just said has to drink the water. But no, see, and that's an interesting one as well, because in the book series, in the book 1, Nynaeve never gets burnt out like they do at the end of episode 8. That never happens, and then they have used that as the reason for why Nynaeve in season 2 has like this block that she has on. But in the books, she has the block from the very beginning of the books, when she starts to learn she can channel, because she was scared of it. And the one thing any fans of the book will be missing out on, and will be just, oh, come on, Nynaeve, is the braid tug that's sort of like her signature. I need to get myself angry, and she gets this braid pull, and it's just not happened yet. So bring back the braid, bring back the tug, because any Nynaeve fan will be waiting for that to happen. And yes.
Certified Soft agrees with you about that. So yes, OMG. And it's interesting because Nynaeve has got this very strong, independent type of personality, but then she's dealing, like you said, with the fact that she, from what can tell from the outside, not having read the books, it's almost like she's afraid of her own potential, of what she could become if she fully embraces her anger. And that's what makes this whole thing scary, because you've got Liandrin behind the scenes working the politic game, and she's a red Aes Sedai. We know that from the way that she's being portrayed, she looks like she embraces almost like a darker side to magic, and she's a little bit more violent in her ways, or a little
She's
bit
a
more.
red, man. She's a red. Reds
Yeah.
have that evil, like they don't like men. They don't, they want to basically rule. They want to be in charge. Now, Nynaeve struggles because she was the wisdom of the two rivers. Now, she was the youngest wisdom. Now, wisdom is like the healer of the town, and also being in charge of like the women's council. So she was the youngest, and she had to fight for every inch that she had there. So she needed that stubbornness, and now she's gone from being like the top of the village, to now being bottom of the rung, and she will not be liking it. Interesting question. We'll come back to that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, come back to it. Okay.
Yeah, no, we can do it now. But just talking about Nynaeve, the block that she put up, they've brought that now that she had from and throughout. They've given her that now, which is a huge arc for Nynaeve to have had. And I'm pleased that they've done that, because in the first series they didn't have that, and that was a real key character building arc for Nynaeve. They rushed a few things for her in season 1. The whole Lan relationship was very rushed in season 1. So
yeah, it felt rushed to me. It didn't feel organic. Yeah.
No. So I'm pleased that they've brought that back, and brought back a true essence character for her, a trait for her to work through. And this whole shielding that she's got, and they talk about the only way she can get through the shielding currently to channel is by getting angry. And that's the braid pull. Come on. So yeah, that's a really interesting one for me. Which Aes Sedai or Aes Sedai colors would you be a water for?
So give me the lowdown on the different colors again, because it's been a while since the first season. So
yeah, so
you've got blue, you've got
blue, who are sort of like they get amongst everything. They're a bit like the politicians of the group. They sort of they want to make sure that everything happens correctly. You've got the yellow, who are the healers. They want to make sure everyone's healthy. They spend their time working up weaves to make sure people are well. Reds, you're definitely not going to be water for a red, because they don't have them. By and large, they don't love them because they despise men, and Leandrin portrays that brilliantly about being weak, and she does a whole thing about that. You've got brown, who are the librarians. They are the historians. You'll get the browns that'll stay in the library and basically keep it working, and then you get some browns a bit like Viren, who'll go out and research history. Then you've got, who else we got? We've got the greens, who are the battle archer, known as the battle archer. They love men. They'll have multiple waters. Okay, Scott, I can understand. That the what do we get up to? The greens, the battle archer, and then you've got the whites and the grays. Yeah, is it white and gray or just grays? It's been a little bit. They are sort of like your when they're your negotiators. So it's interesting.
So which one would you? So which one would you want to be? Like if you were out there. I feel like it's a tough question, but
brown would be a safe one, because you're just chilling out of libraries, and they're not getting up to too much mischief. Green,
I kind of like the politicians. Like I like the blue. I like the ones that get involved in the debate. I want to, like, it's probably dangerous. Yes. If you're on that one, but
it's an interesting one.
Certified Soft says, I would love to be in the brown Arja. So obviously, also with you, Will, towards the libraries. I
would love to be a water.
Lena says, the Arja's test. I'm yellow. Grey was a close second for me. So you're a healer. And then, sorry, sorry, I know this is probably not the best content, but Grey, what does Greys do again? What are they sort of into?
I think, if I can remember rightly, and it has been a bit, I should have researched this before going. Greys are the ones that are sent in when to a war, like two civilizations, two countries are warring, and they need to basically negotiate terms for stopping. That's what the Greys do, basically. I think.
Wow.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, people in the chat.
That's interesting. That was an interesting question. So, Very interesting here, the dynamic between Alana and Leandrin, specifically with the inner politics, with Alana not really wanting to give away someone as powerful as Nynaeve to Leandrin. But Leandrin's kind of throughout this, she gets like she has the inner discussion about, listen, things are going really bad for us right now. The end of times, the signs are close that there is the end of times coming, because we've got all these different really powerful people that are suddenly emerging. We haven't had this in many, many years before. So we can't be playing things by the book if we want to win this war. We need to, embrace what Nynaeve can do. And we really need to utilize that power that she has if we want to win this war at the end of the day. So I feel like, when it comes to negotiating, she ran circles around Alana in this one, but Alana seemed to be a little bit more, her focus was scattered because she also has some loyalty to Moiraine, and she knows that Moiraine also needs her help down the line. So maybe her focus wasn't there. Do you feel like it's a very accurate portrayal of both of these characters?
Oh, most definitely. Alana, you hear bits and you get sort of a bit of a story from her in the books, but this is definitely showing a bit more of her understanding of what's going on. A lot of people don't like Alana in the books for certain things that happen. I won't go into it. But I don't think those are going to happen in the TV series. So we should be grand. The whole Waters situation is quite entertaining. Poor old Egwene walking in and on the three of them having a bit of a whoopsies. Don't know if you picked up on that. That was Alana and her two Waters. Sheriam, great to see the Mistress of Novices there. Good to see another Kiwi actress, New Zealand actress involved. We've got two New Zealand actresses show in front of the show, which is great. We've got Nynaeve as well. So it's quite cool to see another New Zealand actress there.
Yeah, shout out.
Interesting about Leandrin, and that they allude to her having previously killed a novice. That's pretty huge. That's
massive. Yeah. I kind of missed that.
Yeah. And another character we haven't even talked about. Yes, she was just talking. I just see Andrea Lee's talking about Rima. First introduced to me through Shortland Street way back in the day. She was in Shortland Street. But
that's like a local. That's like a local soap opera in New Zealand.
Yeah. Those of you that may have seen Hunt for the Water People, she's on that as well. Another character they introduced, Elias, the Wolf Brother. And he's the one who's helping Perrin and Lyle and the Shinarans track down Padan Fain. Sorry, I'm not used to having all this chat pop up as well while I'm trying to talk. I sort of start reading as I'm talking, and it distracts me. So Elias is another one who was introduced in the first book. He was actually in the first book. He was introduced when Perrin and Egwene first met the Travelers, the Tinkers. So that's how that happened. Whereas in this series, they didn't introduce him in the first series at all. They've introduced him now, and he's taken over a different character's role. So Elias was there, Elias, but then you've got, there was another character in the books called Hurin, who was a sniffer, who was the tracker for the Shinarans. So they've obviously decided to not have another character introduced. Elias is much more important.
Esteban in the live chat saying, looking sharp AF, gents. I got my buzz cut so that I could be in sync with Rand. Yeah, I'm channeling my inner Rand for this podcast. But I wanted to move to I think the next scene here where they go back to Moiraine. You kind of already spoke a little bit about the whole the haggling and her bartering with the other fella there and sort of outsmarting him a little bit. But then he gives a bit of information about two cloaked men that followed him, and then immediately the fades. Yeah, so her mood shifts when she realizes that two fades have been tracking him, and suddenly she's like, "I'm willing to give you 10 marks," where she was willing to give him 1 mark. You need to get the hell out of here. And she said, and he's like, what did you get me into? And she says, the wheel weaves and the wheel wills. Right. So he needs to get out of there, and that's going to come back into play later on, because we know now that they're after her, most likely because she's protecting the dragon, and she's the only one at this stage, at least, that knows that the dragon is still alive, where everybody else is thinking the dragon died in that final battle in the previous one. right?
Yes, yeah, 100%. And as far as they're all aware, he perished. So the only ones that know that he's still alive will be Moiraine and Ishmael, and whoever Ishmael decides to share that with, which is interesting. The two Fades chasing him, yeah, that changed the mood dramatically.
In that conversation very quickly. Yeah. She's like, you need to and by the way, shout out to everybody that is acting on the show, because a lot of the times they bring these shows onto Prime and immediately you can just be like, the actors and the actresses, there's something off. I feel like every single person that's been casted on the show, like I believe the acting. I feel like they're doing a really, really good job at portraying the characters. And again, I don't know the book so well, so it's hard to compare it to that. But as a TV show, as someone that's watching the TV show, I'm fully invested, because if the acting isn't believable, then it doesn't make me as invested. And I made it a very hot call last night after I watched the first 2 episodes, where I think I said to you even, well, I feel like this show is set up to compete with things like Game of Thrones in the future. Like, there is so much world building that's happening that I hope that enough people get onto it. Because if you haven't had that Game of Thrones type of show in a long time and you like the fantasy realm, I feel like this is delivering on all cylinders.
Yeah, and it's trying to fill that void, isn't it, from the Game of Thrones? I mean, there's a lot of fantasy going on at the moment. You've got the Wheel of Time competing with the Lord of the Rings fantasy. You've got the Game of Thrones prequel that's out and has been coming out. You've got Witcher as well, which is going through its own issues at the moment. And
big issues. Like, how can you get rid of the biggest?
But that's going to be the problem, is we're going to have to see if we can. I mean, that's one of the benefits, I suppose, with getting quite an unknown cast, is if you can trust their acting and you can get them up, they're going to stay long term. Whereas if you've got already a very established actors, you can't afford to keep them for as long as you're going to want to with a series like this, without being able to pay them different ways.
Also, Witcher, I think there's other issues there where Witcher was being adapted to Netflix by people who don't necessarily love the source material, where with Wheel of Time, you've got people that love the source material. So yes, they're making 100%. Changes because they're being forced to make certain changes for the show to fit, and some of it's out of their hands. Like we spoke about Matt, the absolute nonsense that the main actor got himself into ended up him being kicked off the show. So they had to change the whole ending of season 1 and then end Matt's storyline because of it. So sometimes things happen that is out of your control, but I feel like that is a big reason why they've struggled. Let's see what people are saying here. Lena saying, agree, Chris, the cast is amazing. And also says, I just found out the Wheel of Time books came out 6 years before Game of Thrones.
A really good little note for that, Lena, too, is the first Game of Thrones book was actually sent to Robert Jordan for his thoughts on it, and he gave a little quote, and one of his quotes was printed. You know how they often have authors' quotes about the books printed in the books or the back of the books? I could be wrong, but I'm 99% sure that Robert Jordan was one of those ones where, he put, I love this comment about the book, so he put it on there. So Robert Jordan was actually quoted on a Game of Thrones book for how much he liked the series. Yeah, because he's such a world builder himself and so respected in the realm of fantasy. So where did we get up to? We were talking about
so the next scene that we're going to talk about is that they're heading back to the Aes Sedai, back to the White Tower, and this is the scene that you kind of mentioned before, where Nynaeve is down with the 2 warders, and they're doing sword fighting, and she's doing this as well. She's there because I feel like this is an interesting character building scene for Nynaeve as well, because she feels more comfortable with the common folk almost than what she does with the Aes Sedai themselves and the people that think that they're above the common folk. And also because she doesn't look down on men the same way that, Liandrin does. 100%. So it's an interesting scene for her.
And she's just she's very much wanting to keep her people safe. So at the moment, trying to channel is incredibly hard for her. Or it just doesn't happen. So she's like, I can't do anything here, but I need to continue to progress and get better at providing safety for my people. So she's like, actually, I might as well do something else. So she's learning sword fighting, and she's fighting 2 warders at once, which is no mean feat. Trying to beat a warder 1-to-1 is almost unheard of, but fighting 2.
Well, they talk about they talk about their training here, and they say that when they go through their training, because obviously she's going through a bit of a moment, she's bonding with them here, saying that she had to do these silly tests that she feels inadequate to do at this stage, and she just can't do it. And they say, well, this is their way of getting you battle hardened, because when we trained, we had to fight 10 men at the same time as one person to be up to our level. So if they're used to fighting 10 men at a time and she's fighting 2 of them, that's like her fighting 20 normal men out there. So it's pretty impressive if you do the math on it.
Yes.
And an interesting scene, because I think that gives her a perspective that they're trying to do the best for her. They're trying to yes, they're being tough on them right now, but it's for a greater purpose of getting them ready to become Aes Sedai in the future.
Yeah, 100%. And it's trying to just the question they ask her as well at the end of it was, why did you come here, is the key thing. Like, what is your reason for coming to the White Tower? And what she's wanting to do. Also, thanks to Andre Lee, who found the quote from Robert Jordan for the Game of Thrones too. So Esteban, as Andre's found out, a Game of Thrones grabs hold and won't let go. It's brilliant. So there we go.
Yeah. So it's interesting because at the same time as this happening, this is when I believe we've got her looking for Egwene, and she wants to go and see Egwene afterwards, but Alanna and Egwene have met in the meantime. And Alanna, she's the so in talking in Alanna's room, she seeks advice on how to focus. Alanna says you need to relax and go for your expectations. That was an interesting scene because Alanna was like sort of coming across as a bit promiscuous. And
oh no, she completely misunderstood what Egwene was talking about. She thought Egwene was talking about a threesome, and Alanna was like, "You just need to focus on making sure you're happy, and your needs are met." And Egwene's like very,
what are we talking
about? Sheltered, and it's just like, wait, hold on a minute. That was not what I was talking about at all. That's just little character building bits like that was definitely missing from season 1. Because they were trying to get so much done, and just now they're starting to open up these characters, add a little bit of humor, add a little bit of their own character. It's just fantastic.
Do you think it helps that naturally the story has all sent them in their separate paths, which now mean that we can actually see them develop as individuals rather than as a group together?
Well, that's exactly how the books are written too. The first book, they were all together. It's not until the second book that you start going off and spending time with those characters. So that makes, it fits with the books perfectly. And it's such a well-built story. You do have those personalities and depth that you can pull from.
Andrew Lee here says, true Green Aja personality. Danica saying, I haven't seen Game of Thrones, but it's also on my list. I've been binging the Walking Dead franchise, but like to do things in batches, binge the whole show at once. I'll bump this up the list. Yeah, Game of Thrones, it's a ride. Like, I'll just say that. You got to experience it and go through it yourself without being influenced by us on our takes on it, but it's a ride. Like,
I handed it.
I don't want to say much.
As the commenter there, I didn't watch the Game of Thrones series until it had completely finished. I waited.
Wow.
Yeah, I waited. I was like, no, wait.
That's a long wait. Isn't that like a 10-year
I read the books. And just never got around to watching the series. And then it was so far behind. I'd start watching it, and then I'd never get out of the first season. I'm like, I'll just wait till it's all done. And I just watched it all in one. And yeah, agreed. Definitely a ride. Yeah.
So this is the point here where Liandrin and Nynaeve have their conversations. Again, it's the whole thing about her saying, we don't have wards. They're beneath us. You shouldn't be training with them. She has that conversation, and Nynaeve is still very much at this point, listen, why do you hate them so much? Like, you don't need to talk down to them. It's interesting because I can see Nynaeve's will in the future potentially being broken because she is kind of being also like there's this whole character building that's happening with her and Egwene kind of being split. There's a rift being formed between them with everybody being in different places that I feel like this is the point where Liandrin can get a feelers into Nynaeve, and I could see her going on a path that potentially isn't the best because she could get influenced by Liandrin in the future, even though I know she's strong-willed. Like, it's a very interesting dynamic between the two of them.
So yeah, and it's an interesting one. The Ajahs are always competing for the new recruits, the novices, the accepteds as they come through. The novices, the Ajahs definitely want to get as many in their ranks as possible. And these girls from the Two Rivers, your Egwene and Nynaeve. Nynaeve being the strongest tenfold in history that they've had in a long time. She's like the prize duck at the moment. They all want her. So Liandrin sniffing around makes perfect sense. Also, her links to the main character from that last season where the Amarillion seat says there's a lot going around amongst the five of you. It makes perfect sense that they want her because there's more going on with those girls and the three lads, and they want to make sure they've got their hooks in. I talked about how we were looking forward to seeing a series created, seeing the weaves being woven and seeing how they're handling that is just magic. It's brilliant.
It looks cool.
It does, and that was another thing.
Yeah.
You're like, you imagine it, you read it, and you're like, how on earth are they going to put this on the screen? And I think they're handling it brilliantly. It just looks.
I'm enjoying it.
And then also there was a little note about Nynaeve seeing a weave once and replicating it. This is a huge in the books. This is one thing she's renowned for in the books, is the fact that she can watch a weave done once and boom, she can replicate it. And that's unheard of as well, because generally Aes Sedai will see weave and they have to practice until they can get it. And she can see it once and she can just go boom, done.
But you can see at this point, Liandrin, the sheer power of her to be able to force Nynaeve against the wall and then also cut her off. It looked like she cut her off or blocked her at one point where she couldn't do anything, where she's like, I can still do this to you now, but I want you to know what this feels like so that you get angry and pissed off about the fact that I'm stronger than you, so you get stronger than me, so no one can do this to you again, which is very interesting sort of dynamic and a very brutal way of training her.
Yeah, 100%. It's very interesting, and because there's another red in the books that hasn't been introduced, and I'm wondering if the Liandrin is kind of a combination of a couple.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see how it plans out. It's interesting, but really cool. I'm loving it.
Yeah, so this is the point in the show where we finally start getting to see Perrin a little bit, and the fact that he's sort of out and about. And they're looking for Padan Fain at this point. They're trying to get him. And what was the other the main thing that Padan Fain's after? He's after is it the horn or?
He's got the horn. Padan Fain has the horn.
He's got the horn.
So Padan Fain has the horn of Valia now, and that does happen in the books, that's quite.
So give us a little bit of a breakdown on the horn of Valian and why it is so important for them to get it again. For those because there was this big break between season 1 and season 2 that if people didn't stay on top of it, if they didn't go back and watch the first season, maybe that's something that they've sort of missed at this point.
So the horn is to be played at the last battle, and what it will do is there's a whole lot of heroes from the past that are tied to the horn, and when the horn is blown, those heroes will ride through the clouds and be available to fight in the last battle. They're tied to the horn through the wheel, and as soon as the horn's blown, they'll get thrown back out to join in that battle. So basically, it's a Hail Mary shot. We want to blow the horn at the last battle to help the Dragon Reborn and to go in and fight against the Dark One and the Dark Friends. The fact that a Dark Friend, a very potent Dark Friend, has it now is absolutely terrifying, because the last thing we want is for a Dark Friend to blow the horn and bring the heroes of the old onto the dark sides, with the Dark Friends, and to go with the Dark One. And that's why they desperately and also they want to make sure that it's not blown at they either want to blow it on their side, or they want to make sure it can't be blown, so that the Dragon Reborn doesn't have that backup. So it is crucial that they get it, and that's why they are hunting as they are, to collect it. One little note on that: Lyle riding a horse threw me completely, because he's an Ogier, he's big, he's massive, and they like to walk on their feet. They don't like to ride horses. So that scene cut to him riding on a horse just threw me completely, because in the books, he would fight and argue. And wouldn't fight, but he'd just, nope, feet, my legs are good. And he could run as fast as a horse as well, and for a duration of. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. for a purist, maybe a little bit.
Maybe it's because of a little bit of, like they didn't want to spend the money on CGI magic for him to run next to it. I don't know what the reasoning behind it.
Maybe just because he's not as big as imagined. It's interesting.
Yeah.
The other one, speaking of that, was the fact that Perrin's talking about Layla again, his departed
Yeah,
wife.
and he doesn't have a wife in the books, right?
Nope,
So
nope,
that's a
not
big
at
part
all.
of the storyline. Even
Yeah.
even when they do the celebration for the Two Rivers, and he's like got his ring, and he takes it off and then puts it back on. It's interesting that they're choosing to make that a big part of his character moving forward, and that's going to remain something that stays with him.
Yeah, well, he's always someone in the books who's worried about losing control. So it kind of gives him the reason for losing control, if you know what I mean. Like he's worried about losing control because of this hurt that he's got inside himself for this death of the wife. And my only thing is that's to try and juxtaposition so that he's got that reason. He's got the reason to lose it, and that's why he's trying to hold it as much as he can.
Yeah,
it's
interesting because we also see Perrin's like natural abilities starting to kick in now here throughout this episode, and also into the second episode, where he can see visions of the past, like, or can sense what happened. So almost like a private investigator when he comes in there. Like, I don't know, it's probably the senses of the smell or whatever is going on there, that by that he kind of feels and sees visions. But it's that strong that it actually takes him out of his current surroundings and puts him right there, which was an interesting dynamic.
It is. In the books, they described it as more of a smell type thing that he can sort of trace the smells. So it's quite interesting to sort of see how it is being played out in the series. So I'm curious.
I think it's for us to understand it. I feel like if he was just standing there smelling it and saying it, maybe wouldn't have translated as well to us.
No, not at all. And that's the thing. It'll be interesting to see how that's used differently because of the fact that it's more of a visual thing. Which it's interesting. It's 100%. It's quite curious.
It's interesting because you've got Min, who we'll talk about later on, that can see the future and he can see the past. So they're kind of like with the
ultimate
perfect 2020, perfect 2020 vision. Like you can see everything in the past and future, which I think is pretty cool. We also at this point, let's see what happened here. This is where we get introduced towards the end of this episode to Matt as well. He's lying down somewhere. We later on find out that it's in a bit of a prison cell in the White Tower, and that Liandrin is coming in there, and she's the one who's captured him. Now, is this part of the books, or is this completely new? Because Matt kind of went off. Yeah, he went on a different journey right by the end of season 1.
Yeah, completely new. He's definitely not locked in a cell in the books. He's allowed, from what I can remember, he's allowed to be frequenting the taverns in Tar Valon. He's not allowed to leave Tar Valon after he's been healed, but he's definitely not locked in a cell. So basically what he's doing is he's just drinking and gambling in Tar Valon as he's stuck there. But he's at this point in the series, in the books, no, he's definitely not locked in a cell. Welcome to Donald Finn as well, the new Matt. It's never going to be an easy one coming in, but I think he's going to very quickly take over. The scenes that we see in the first 2 episodes are really solid from him, and really believable. It also, just a little interesting, but the lanterns that they're all lighting for Beltane is at the very start of season 1. So it shows that between season 1 and now, at the beginning of season 2, it's a year. And basically Beltane is the start of spring for them. So it's going to start into the summertime. So winter's done, springtime. So it actually fits with the New Zealand calendar as well, being in the Southern Hemisphere. We just had the spring as well. So I was like, oh, cool. They have in spring too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because she kind of reads the letter to him, and he's not mentioned in the letter by Perrin at all. Perrin didn't really, bring it up. But also, it's interesting because Perrin always talks about Rand and the girls. It's almost like the relationship between Perrin and Matt, it's not as strong.
No. It's mentioned in the but his letter to Perrin's letter to the girls mentions Matt. So Leandrin's leaving it out purposely to help increase his distrust with everybody. Woo! Esteban.
Yeah. Wow. Mad Dog Esteban coming in with the $30 AU super sticker, and it is it's a hippopotamus saying "epic fail." Epic fail for me, probably forgetting that he was mentioned in the letter. So that's why I've got Will here. Will's keeping me up onto speed. Yeah. But thank you so much. Really appreciate that. We'll be putting it straight back into the channel to continue to help this channel grow. Lena saying Matt was included. She left him out. So obviously she's she's manipulating him at this stage.
Yeah,
in
and
the show.
because of the impact the blade from Shadow Logoth had on him anyway, it increases distrust, and that was what he was starting to have at the end of before they removed the dagger. So it kind of just is continuing to feed that self-loathing that he has, the reason why he didn't follow them, because he's definitely going through that sort of depression stage, and Leandrin's just trying to feed that as much as she can, keep him in a cell. Your friends don't care about you, they're not even worried about you, they're talking about everybody else, like those sorts of things. But no,
it's interesting. It's interesting that she's doing that. Like, it makes me as a viewer of the TV show wonder, like, what's her purpose with him? Like, what is she just trying to? Because she doesn't like me, and it's not like she's gonna. I don't think she thinks she's above him. Like, she's not going to try and use him surely in the show.
Torturing, just
having fun with him.
He's one of the three that they think are Ta'veren, so they think he's the wheel weaves around him as well. So she's just trying to have as much control over him as possible, and being the person who brings him sweet cakes, and has him locked up. But it is all about that sort of that. What is it when you sort of start to love the person who's locked in?
What's it called?
You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I wonder if that's what she's. Yeah, so and I think that's what she's possibly working on as well. Making sure his friends don't think about him. Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome. That's the one. Yeah. So it's interesting because at this point we get a very quick scene with Rand with his short hair, also on his own, celebrating Beltane, and that's going to come back into play when we go to the second episode. We'll talk a little bit more about Rand then, but the final sort of scene here is
what a fight!
Is the big fight, and the choreography on this fight was amazing because you get Moiraine trying to sneak out on her own. And I don't know if she was trying to leave. It looks like she tried to leave completely from there and not let Lan know. But Lan realizes she's away. He ends up going after her. And then they end up going up against, what do you call them again? The Fades.
Fades, yeah. Three of them.
So 3 Fades at the same time. She kills one.
Yep.
Very impressive.
And a very boss move. Like, that was amazing. Because... she's always relied on her power. She's been in Aes Sedai. She's never had to do a sort of a hand-to-hand combat type thing. And she's had to rely on her human instincts. They don't have any extra ones. So she's just using her intelligence and her knowing that Fades travel by shadows. So Fades can sort of phase in and phase out of the shadows. And she just basically knows. She does that little trick with her foot to make sure that the Fade knows she's at this rock. And then she just waits for the perfect moment and then... blade through the but then she didn't expect there to be 2 more, and then if Lan hadn't turned up, it would have been game over. Was it
Lan
was it 4 in the end? Because I feel like he decapitated.
I feel like he ended up fighting 3 at the end as well. So so it must have been 4.
I would say he flew in and decapitated 1, and then 2 others rocked up, and that's when he was in a bit of a trouble.
And this is where you can see the level of throughout this. There's another big battle that happens later on in episode 2 as well. The choreography of the fights, I think, was pretty impressive. It was really cool to see the fighting moves in that. And Lan's character has been changed a little bit as well from the books, right? Because in the books, isn't he more based on almost like a Viking, where in this one it's more like samurai almost, that influence that's coming in?
Yes. If you look at even the artwork for the books that are on the covers, it definitely shows sort of a mixture, but you definitely imagine some sort of knight type character that is very proficient with the blade. But no, it is the water that we've got for Lan. I think he's definitely different, but fits perfectly. I'm a big fan. And then Thomas rolling in with his flaming blade to save the day at the end with Verin.
So cool.
Flaming blade is just awesome. I was just like, that's cool.
And with Verin there as well. So I mean, at the end of the day, they do end up just surviving that fight. But it was a really cool scene to see as we end the first episode here and go into episode 2, which now we are sort of tracking back towards Rand. Rand is, dreaming about killing everyone that he loves. He's feeling isolated, and then we see that he's there with someone, Selene.
Yes,
the innkeeper and him, they're seeing each other right now. And I had to while I was watching this, obviously there's a few times I'm like, what's the significance of Selene? So I looked it up, and then I realized,
Oh, you did you?
I may see something I shouldn't see. Yeah,
No,
so we won't talk about that.
Yourself. No,
yeah,
but
we won't talk about that. But she's
won't
got some
spoil anything.
significance.
She does. Her character is in the second book. It is introduced. Selene is introduced in the second book, but in a completely different time and place. I'll say that much to it. She is definitely in the
I don't
books,
know much about what
not.
she's going to do. Luckily, I don't know the conclusion of her storyline. I just realized, like, oh, okay, I think I should stop reading.
I should not have Googled that one.
Yeah. And it's like over my head. But it's interesting because there's a really interesting dynamic in the relationship between the two of them as well that's going to develop throughout this. We might as well talk about it now because we can skip it later on. But she's using him to forget about someone. Oh, sorry, to remember someone, right?
Yes.
And he's using her to forget about someone. So they're like both using each other, but they're happy to be together. And I wonder in real life how often relationships are kind of like this as well. You know, it's pretty messed up, but it's working.
It's very and it's quite rough and violent and definitely an interesting dynamic. The fact that she's using him to remember someone is definitely it's foreshadowing without saying anything else.
I mean, I've got some theories behind that. Like I said, I didn't see everything, but I've got some theories behind that. I think Andre's surely trolling here, right? It's make sure, it's saying Selene gets married and have a lot of kids together with Rand. Lena says, I don't think I like her. I don't trust her. Something interesting, because it's interesting because he's constantly saying, like, listen, you shouldn't be around me. It's dangerous for you. And she's like, I'm good. You know, and that makes you think that she knows who he is. So she's got some sort of an inclination and she's gravitating towards him. That's what, from not knowing anything, that's kind of what I'm thinking at this stage.
But also it's alluded to that she may own an inn, and she's probably thinking, this boy, what dangers can she bring to me? If, that, like, if you're running an inn in an outskirts of a city, it's going to be rough. There's going to be tavern brawls. There's going to be all those sorts of things going on. She's probably like, and come on, boy, you don't, like, if you didn't know anything else, that's probably, you could argue that that's just what that is. Rand working in an asylum in Karen.
That's interesting.
That's completely, new, completely different. Really interesting, though, as well as the fact that he's now hearing voices or hearing a voice. That will play in later on. I'm not going to tell anything more, but that is quite an interesting arc to have started since the breaking.
I found it interesting that, they had this sort of almost like a flashback that said that those men that learn how to weave, they become mad themselves, so that he would now work in an asylum to kind of see where he could end up as, and sort of to have that in front of his face while he knows that he's also kind of going mad himself because he's hearing voices and things like that as well. I think it's an interesting dichotomy to see that play out.
And also the Errol character is quite fun too. Who was introduced?
Yeah, I was going to ask about him. New
character also.
Because he brought up
in the books. No, definitely there was no asylum in the books. Whether or not there was an Errol at a later stage or a different time, maybe, I don't remember every character, but there was definitely no asylum, and there was definitely no meet cute with him and an Errol in an asylum. Discussing the Ale War is really interesting because that's where Rand was essentially born. Was during the Ale War, and his parents, dad in particular, was an Ale. So that's really quite a cool wee bit. And then also in the book, the first book, Lan is teaching Rand how to use his sword. So the fact that Errol is a blade master as well, and Rand mentions about bringing his sword in and learning a few moves as well. It's talking cool. Like that's been happening over a few months. So that was really interesting. There's a few things that they've skipped off. The second book starts with Lan and Rand having practice, and then there's a bubble of evil that happens. They haven't had any bubbles of evil yet. Whether or not they will or not, we don't know. Bubbles of evil are basically where the dark one's touching the weave, and then there's a bubble of evil that sort of travels across the thread and then hits them, everyone, and things go batshit crazy. So you might have reflections of yourself coming out of the mirror to fight you type thing, or you may have your weapons try and kill you. Like those are the sorts of like really random things to start happening, and they haven't happened in the series yet. They may never. They may just go, this is too hard to explain. But that's something that happens in the book that hasn't happened yet either. Yeah, don't know if we'll get a Lan training Rand. It depends if they meet up again or how they meet up. I don't see it happening this
Well,
season.
Moraine does now tell in this episode. She does tell Lan that he's alive. So I mean,
Yes.
there could be a point where he would go back. Maybe, I don't know. Like, but it's interesting because let's not get too far ahead in the episode. There's a few things that happens later on
Okay.
that I want to talk
Okay.
about. But
Okay.
we start off with Moraine and Lan here in this next scene where they're both depleted after the fight. They're both trying to recover, and then Varen mentions here that she will now accompany them both back to White Tower. So she clearly now realizes that things have escalated, and she can't keep them safe where they're at. They need to go back to White Tower, which Moraine is at this stage been told she's exiled from White Tower, so she doesn't really want to go back. And we get to see a little bit more of that strained relationship between Lan and Moraine, which is really interesting throughout both episodes, because it kind of to me feels like Moraine's treating him pretty crappy. At this stage.
She's treating him like a dog to get rid of him. She's trying to send him away, and
she's trying to keep him safe. I feel like.
100%.
I feel like she's trying to keep him safe.
She will be aware that there was that relationship with him and Nynaeve. She will be aware that Nynaeve is currently in the White Tower, which is full of snakes, and we now know the Black Aja thanks to the start of the scene. So she's possibly going, actually, get away from me. I've got my own jobs, my own stuff I need to do. You need to go and do your own thing. And so she's little snide comments. The back end comment about slipping off the horse. You're a bit too injured, go get Thomas to do it because I'm worried I'm going to fall off the horse because the saddle will fall. Like, those little snide comments are definitely not the Moraine that we've come to know in the first season. And there's a reason for it. She's very calculated. She'll do everything purposefully. And that's what she's trying to do. And it even culminates at the end, like, Rand's alive. Look, just go. And I'm doing this and you can do it. And that's how she's just trying to get rid of him. And it'll be to keep him safe, while also trying to do what she needs to do without eyes watching her. It's interesting. The Nynaeve and Perrin sword fighting. I had that as a note down too, Andre. It's very weird seeing Perrin walking around with a sword. It shouldn't be happening. An axe or a hammer, one of the two. Definitely not a sword. I don't think it's ever referred to him in the series in its entirety of Perrin holding a sword. That was a bit jarring to me too. And I'm trying my best, Lena. I'm very much trying my best.
I tell you what, man, I would have been lost in the source without you. Like, you're giving us so much great back and behind the scenes info. I mean, one of the things you mentioned, which was the reference to Rand being an Aleman.
Yes.
And it's a race that is extinct that he's from. He's trying to learn.
Not extinct. Not extinct. No.
All right.
They've gone off to the waste, the Ale waste, and they will come back. Don't you worry. There'll be more.
Interesting. Well, yeah. I love that, because I've got it here in this next scene as well, where he has this conversation with Errol, and Errol is explaining to him the traits of an Ale woman, and the stubbornness and how they fight and all this kind of stuff, which is really interesting because he's getting to learn about his background a little bit here as well. But at this stage, one of the things that's lost to me is, does Rand know that he's got this background? Because in the first season, I remember him kind of finding out that his dad wasn't his real dad.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty much it from my memory. I don't think he actually at this stage knows his own history, right? Does he know he's an Aleman, or where did he get to know that he is an Aleman?
So the Dragon Reborn was born on the side of Dragonmount during the Ale War. And Tam al'Thor, who was Rand's father by paternal, like adopted father, who Rand finds out that he was not Tam's father, was off fighting at the time, and he became a blade master in his own. That's why he had the Heron blade, and he came across Rand being born on the side of Dragonmount. It is a really good book. So I think he knows that he's an Aleman.
Yeah.
That's why he's cut his hair, because the reddish blonde, strawberry blonde hair the red hair is a very
Right.
telling trait of an ale. So, and he's taller, and so that's one of the reasons why he will have shaved his head, to try and hide his origins a bit more and not to stand out. And being in Carahan, they know, because that was where the ale war started. Like that was basically the ale came across to fight Carahan after the king chopped down a tree that was a gift.
Yeah.
That's so being in Carahan, they all have seen the ale 20 odd years before, 20 years before. So they very much are familiar with ale for not the good reasons. Sorry, my son's just waving through the window.
All good.
So
It's like, why is Daddy taking so long? Why is he not coming out and playing?
Yeah, pretty much. And so that's why he will have shaved his head, is to go undercover as much as possible. And Eero's just a bit of a clever old bugger, really. And
it's interesting. That's interesting. You actually gave me a good background in regards to the cutting of his hair, because I mean, it's not really explained to us, but it makes a lot of sense that's why. It's like
that would be my assumption. It's just to hide those things, and also because he had the curly red hair, and it's trying to hide all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Now, back at White Tower, there's some interesting stuff that happens here with Liandrin and Nynaeve. Nynaeve gets grabbed to come up to a room where there's a girl that's very sick, that's busy dying. Obviously, with Nynaeve being a healer, like you mentioned, from her original village in the Two Rivers, she thinks she's there to help, but then this is beyond her pay grade, what's happened to the girl. And there is another healer there that actually ends up healing the little girl in there.
Yeah. Liandrin does everything purposefully. Nothing she's doing, it's all very calculated. So the fact that she's brought Nynaeve in to see this healing is calculated. She's also very calculated in showing that she has stolen some medicine, which is ensuring that Nynaeve is starting to get a bit suspicious. There's little tricks, there's little things that are going on, and then later on, when they do that following, there's a look back to make sure. I don't know if you caught that, if you copped that. It's all very calculated. It's all very calculated.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because there's obviously a whole thing that happens from here with her stealing the medicine. Another thing I noted down here is that she also put down that they can slow the aging process, which becomes a big thing later on as well, because as she walks away, we get this other scene as well, and I'm going to talk about both of them because it kind of flows into each other, where Nynaeve does end up following Liandrin, gets to where Liandrin is standing over a very old man. She's trying to do something that she thinks is healing him, which is actually hurting him. But we also find out at the end that it potentially is her son, which shows that she is so many years old, and his son is already aged because he doesn't have the magical abilities that she has to keep herself young, which was an insane storyline for me to see play out.
Yeah. Just before that too, also just a little fan outfit was the cuffs of the accepted top, showing all the different Aja colors. Was the costuming in this show is stunning. And just having that, and then also in episode 1 when Egwene was in cleaning the Amaryllian seats room, and there was the Amaryllian seats costume with all the different colors of the Aja. Just the costumes stands just fantastic. But no, on that they do Aes Sedai, anyone who channels the one power does have their age they could live for is a very long, very, very, very long time. And there's some interesting things that we could go into later on, depending on what information they share and what we learn. But that is definitely one of the things that they get, is a bit of longevity. But do you want to talk a bit more about that scene now while we're talking about Liandrin and Nynaeve?
Okay, yeah, might as well. Yeah, let's treat them together, because I feel like both scenes kind of fuse them together.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting juxtaposition in the fact that we've got Liandrin, who's a red who hates men, and then it cuts to her supposedly trying to keep this man alive. My first notes as I'm watching, I'm like, husband? Water? No. And then it's like, my boy, I think she says at the end, is like, okay, that's really weird, because that means she's had, and but just before she walks into the room, she cops to make sure, she looks back just to make sure that Nynaeve is following. And there's just a slight, real quick, if you noticed, I sort of copped that and went, okay, she's definitely making sure Nynaeve's following her. This whole scene, this whole thing is very much an orchestrated. That loss of temper by Leandrin, that's
wow, I did not pick that up.
That's all very calculated, is my guess. I could just be being a bit suspicious, and I could be reading into it way too much because I was busy typing notes at the same time. But my thoughts are it is very, very planned by Leandrin to make sure that Nynaeve is battling different things. And there'll be some fictitious story that she goes into later on about that, I'm guessing Leandrin will. But we'll see.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't pick up the whole fact that she probably led her down there for a reason, and that makes me wonder what that reason could be. Is it to get her to, like you said, struggle with more demons so she can become more disenfranchised with the rest of her friends, so that she has more control over her mental state? But then also, is there a thing that she's thinking that she can use Nynaeve to help with whatever this boy, the son of her, is struggling with?
Yeah. I don't know, and yeah, we're not sure. And this boy, don't know. I don't want to go into spoilers. I'm not sure. We will see.
That's fair. We also at the same point have Matt again and Leandrin just before she went out there, coming in there and him saying he could have been naked, and she said, "Don't flatter yourself," or something like that. It was just a funny scene, bit of nothingness between them. But we do see him continue to work through this wall that is between them. And I think this is a good time to talk about this in its totality, what happens in this episode. So he does end up getting through this wall, seeing that there is a prison right next to him. And in that prison is a familiar character to us, which is Min. And she is the seer from season 1. For those that watched the TV show, she was introduced to us towards the end of season 1. In the book, she comes in actually a lot earlier, but she can see people's future. And I've got to say, off the bat, I really love the playfulness between these two characters. And I felt like the chemistry really popped on the screen for me.
Oh, it was great. The wine, and he gives her the glass and keeps the bottle for himself. Those little bits are very Matt. And then, will you come and visit again? And she's like, I'll check my schedule. I'll check my social calendar. Yeah. I was like, just these little bits is really interesting. The vision of that she saw at the end with Matt killing or stabbing Rand was interesting. And because as far as she's concerned, everything she sees happens and comes true. So we'll see how that pans out and see how that's going to lead to.
For people that maybe missed it, like Alina, I think you're only similar to myself, more into the TV show. It's like she already met Rand in season 1, remember? And she saw, I think, that he was the dragon. She already knew that at that time, right? So she knows how important Rand is to the prophecy. And for her to see him potentially killing Rand would be something that would put her in two minds in regards to, should she get closer to this guy? Should she stop him? Like, I'm sure that she's dealing with her own conflicts there, but I thought this was a fun scene as well. Andrea Lee says, when I saw that scene for the first time, awesome pairing and chemistry, and then followed by no, please no, and lol, spoiler. So probably something that we can't talk about, but well, you gave a smile, so I feel like you know what he's talking about.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. It's showing depth of characters. It's showing that they've got so much story to pull, and they're just being very careful as to what they weave into the series, which is great.
Now, at this point, also at White Tower, Gwen is spotting that somebody blocked her door with pillows. She's making a new friend there, which is the
Elaine.
Parent Elaine.
Yes, Elaine
comes into it again. Yes. So Elaine seems to be a very big character. I really enjoyed these scenes with Elaine at first talking about, you're my subject, and that type of thing. And then I was like, okay, she's clearly thinking she's of a certain class. She's been brought up in this way where people need to kiss the ring kind of thing. And you could easily say she's a spoiled brat by just looking at that. But then there comes a point in the show where she could give away who the person was that ordered maids to come to White Tower and she protects that person. So she shows loyalty there as well. So there's this interesting, again, sort of dichotomy between her being this person that has been, a princess her whole life pretty much, and wants to act like a princess, but then also there is a deep loyalty within her. So there is redeeming qualities within this character as well. I already really like Elaine already.
Yes.
And she gives really good, wise words of wisdom, even to Egwene, by saying, don't be jealous of your friend. You're starting to become jealous of your friend. Things like that. So, I mean, she seems like she's going to be a fan favorite character to me.
Yes, she will be. And we're very, very pleased to see Elaine join the cast. I think Sierra Coveney, I think her name is the actress. I don't know if she's done much work prior, but she started off, finally, she started off really strong as an actress into the role. Like you say, plays the role perfectly. Starts off with that very hoity-toity, privilege, and then busts into a bit of loyalty and a bit of human interaction with it. No, I'll take the switch for that, which is just fantastic. And she's definitely got some wise words to be said. And she's in the book, she's great with little quips, because she had a nana and like a maid nanny, I can't remember her name now, I have to look it up, who is an older lady who basically looked after her as a child, when her mother, the queen, is busy with what she does. And she's great with some really awesome sayings that you read the book and go, I need to write that down. That's a great little saying I should be able to use. So no, she's a great wee character. And yeah, she should have been in the first season too, but you can only introduce so many characters. And they've only got
and it's interesting. I absolutely love this friendship that's forming between Egwene and Elaine here, because Elaine, when she calls her out for potentially being jealous of Nynaeve, because Nynaeve is getting all this attention, and every time anybody wants to talk to Egwene, it's about Nynaeve, which obviously that's going to have it's going to sort of crack down on your self-belief that you're there on your own merit if they're only asking about your friend all the time. But she kind of comes from it with the angle of she's the daughter heir of the most powerful nation in the world. She knows what jealousy looks like, because her life, she's probably seen people looking at her saying, you've got everything that I would love to have. So she gets that. She's seen firsthand how people
the jealousy, how people
and the yeah. So it's interesting. I like that. And then there's also this really cool line that she has. I can't remember the exact word, but it was about they say some of the most powerful alliances or deals have been made between these four walls and the White Towers. Can you imagine what? With us sitting here right now, what our future entails and how powerful a duo we can be in the future, which gets me excited to see this friendship and relationship between the two of them blossom, because I feel like it's going to be a big part of the story. And I've got to say, Egwene's character has been sort of pushed on the back burner a little bit so far in the first couple of episodes.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, she's very much struggling with that jealousy of Nynaeve, and then also she's working very hard to try and improve, because she wants the best for herself. She wants to try and keep up there and compete. And then, like you say, Elaine coming in, it's interesting because Nynaeve is the one power is like the strongest. Elaine and Egwene are very similar. They're on par. And the Aes Sedai, how you rank and status in Aes Sedai world in the White Tower is very much on power. So the power that you can control and how much source you can control. So by having Nynaeve, essentially later on, she will rank higher. Like if you're in a conversation with someone, if you control more power, you can control one power than the other person, you rank above them. So it's very much a status thing in regards to that for the White Tower.
Interesting.
The Wonder Girls by the fandom. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. And they do. These girls coming in rock the White Tower because they come in with so much power and so much ability. They have, like, Elaine making homebrew. Like, come on, what queen do you think is going to be making bootleg bloody vodka
That's
or whatever
amazing.
it is? It was awesome, but that leads into her character arc of a creator later on, without spoilers as well.
Right.
She's very much an inventor, so to speak. So that's quite cool.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing her character developing a little bit more. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Who else do we have here? We've got the scene with Lan out in the wild, and I think it's the whole scene of how they met the story behind how they met, with Moraine trying to track him, thinking that he's a Fade, and he's thinking that he's someone that's been sent to him by his clan to sleep with. But basically, if I remember correctly, the whole thing, right? And how they met. How accurate was that? Do we get a backstory into the Moraine Lan story on the books? Do they explain that in full?
And they allude to it a few times about him chucking her in the water, and then she did the same to him with the one power. I don't remember it verbatim, but it's very similar to that from what I can gather, from what I can remember. It's nice just to have that sort of that little bit there. And then, you know, Lan's hiding a letter. Did you notice he hides a letter, which I think must have been from Nynaeve? In that scene as well, he sort of he quickly tucks it away. My guess is that's a letter from Nynaeve. And then Moraine's talking about how, you know, he saw Trolloc heads sticking on poles and it didn't phase him, and she knew from there that he'd be able to survive on his own, knowing that she assumed that she was going to die along the way and knew that Lan would be able to keep going, because a Warder and a Aes Sedai, they are together until genuinely the Warder dies. So the fact that they took, it is in the prequel. Thank you. It is. And yeah, that whole comment was actually had a lot more depth to it, because at that point already Moiraine is talking about and thinking about the fact that she won't survive.
Right.
She's expected, because she's like, I knew that he'd be able to survive on his own. So she's already thinking about, if I've got a Warder, I don't want the Warder to go off and die. Like I said earlier on in the pod, that often happened when the Aes Sedai dies. So they're obviously, she's already thinking about that, going, he'll survive on his own. It's fine.
So Andrew Lee says, I recommend New Spring, the Wheel of Time prequel, to understand Lan and Moraine's tiffs and platonic relationship a bit more. I'll definitely have to check that out. And it's interesting because at this point as well, this is where she lets him know that the Dragon Reborn is still alive, that, you know, we didn't kill the Dark One, we just set Ishamael free, who's one of the lieutenants, and that this is the beginning. The seal is now broken. There will be more people more of these lieutenants that will follow. And she mentions that it's now his sort of duty to go back to White Tower, and he needs to split from her at this stage, which she doesn't want to do. And this is the point where Alana appears, because Alana had the choice to stay back at White Tower to fight for Nynaeve or to go out and help Moraine, and she ended up going out to help Moraine at this point. And she said, I will get Alana to physically do it. Or like, what was bond you, basically.
And that's like they talked about that almost being like rape, because if you bond somebody, you can sort of, your connection is very deep at that point. You can sort of sense how they're feeling, and you can't shield that. Waters can't necessarily block that as easily. So the fact that she talks about, I'll get her to bond you, that's an incredibly powerful statement. Personal. That's very, very personal.
Wow. Yeah. So at that point, he knows that he's kind of out of options. And he kind of seems really hurt by this, because he says, I trusted you as an equal. And he says, Aes Sedai can never lie. So let me know, did you ever see me as an equal? And she says, no, you were always my subordinate, you know, which is very interesting, because she's currently cut off from the weave. So I wonder if that allows for her to lie, was my initial thought, because I feel like she didn't have that relationship with him, and potentially she's lying because she's not bound right now by the weave to tell the truth.
It's that's actually a very, very clever assumption, and you picked up on that incredibly well, Chris. It's a very unknown thing in regards to the characters, because not a lot of Aes Sedai survive after having been cut off. So they don't. A lot of Aes Sedai don't realize that once you've been cut off, you can lie. Like they are in the story, in the books, when that happens, they're amazed that they can lie, and a lot of Aes Sedai don't know that. So the fact that you picked up on that, well done.
I got one right out of the 20.
You did. 100. No, you're on point there. So the fact that she has said that, and he's gone, you can't lie. That is definitely, she can essentially now, if they follow the stories.
Yeah, because I just don't believe that she's really. I don't believe that she's really that cold-hearted. It's like you said. Yeah. Everything she does at this point is actually to keep him safe, which shows that she cares about him. You know, more than
Aes Sedai, and the one thing that Aes Sedai are really well known for is twisting the truth. So they will tell the truth because they have to, but they're really good at twisting it to a point where they will only tell what they mean to tell, and they can
They're
sort of
wordsmiths.
100%, yeah, the best of it.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's one of the oaths that they have to hold an oath rod when they become Aes Sedai, and yeah, it's great. I have to see YouTube. Dusty Will channel, man, that's a great channel. I've watched that a long time ago.
Right. Yeah. Well, listen, we could reach out. So they cover the Wheel of Time as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I can reach out to them and see if they would like for us
Yeah.
to go on there and have a chat. But yeah, no, Lena, we appreciate you being here. We're very close to actually the end of this as well. But
Yes.
you know, we really appreciate you because there's only like 2 more scenes that I wanted to talk about. The one being in the village itself, where there's the ominous howling of the wind that comes through. And this is the second, like they choose their big fight scenes to be towards the end of each of the episodes. So far, that's kind of the format they've got. But Perrin is fast asleep in the tavern while all hell is breaking loose around him. And the first thing that I was thinking when they started pulling him out and they're like dragging him is like, how did he not realize that there's this massive battle going on around him and he hasn't woken up? I'm a very, you know, I don't sleep deep. Like if someone opens my door, I'm awake. So I don't know how he managed to sleep through that.
Yes, and yeah, there was a little bit of a wonder there too. I won't go into any details about Perrin, but he should definitely not have slept through that. Esteban.
So also stream Jed's going to jump off. Mrs. Rickens. Will looks like a Viking extra, and Chris looks like a Russell Crowe character from way back in the day. Awesome, man. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so it's an interesting fight here, obviously, because we get them all in this big fight scene. There was also this thing you mentioned that Elias, you know, and I think we kind of missed this as they're going to the tavern, says to him, you've got to realize that the Shenarans are not your people. You shouldn't be spending as much time with them or sleeping in the tavern as he wants to sleep outside under the stars in the open space, which was very interesting because obviously Elias is his people, but he's not realized this yet, you know, as he's with
he doesn't know that yet.
Yeah, but they seem like good fighters, the Shenarans, at least at this stage, and they hold up their own in this battle.
Oh, most definitely. Well, the Shenarans have spent their life with a sword. They are literally the age of when they're given their sword. That's how old they determine themselves to be. They're not the age of their birth age. They are so many years old by the age of how long they've had their sword for. That's how they determine how old they are as men. And they've been fighting at the Blight and at the Tywin's Gap for their entirety of as long as they can remember. So they will be experts. They will be as good as Warders or just a little bit below Warders status as a group. Yeah.
So it's interesting because the end of the scene, because we don't know who's kind of coming in here and fighting. I don't. I mean, you might have seen from the start who they were coming in, but at the end of it, it's got this big, I guess, Egyptian style pyramid, kind of thing that's being carried in. And immediately it looked like the clothes that they wear, it's kind of like based on the Egyptians almost, this specific race of people, with a lady sitting at the top of the throne. And then very importantly, Ishamael is next to her on the podium with the throne. So give us a little bit of insight.
So you've got, how much time we got? So basically the Sanchin are the people that have arrived. Now they originated from where we all are now, but then what happened, they were from what's called an Arthur Hawkwing time, and they basically left. They left on boats overseas, over the water, and disappeared and sort of left everyone's mind. And then they are now coming back to take back over the land, is what it is. So this group that's just turned up is like the forerunners. They're the first group that are arriving before the rest of them turn up. So this isn't even the main group. This is just the first group that's arrived. And they are basically going to, try and take over. They do it in a pretty brutal, but then also later on, they also basically say, you've got to say some oaths to us and then you're good to go. And then you carry on your business as usual. But their relationship with the One Power is very different to how it is like with Randland, essentially, where everyone is, because people that wield the one power, men are killed. Boom, no hesitation of that. But women are leashed. So the Sanshin leash the channelers and basically have them. And you would have seen the women that had the little mouthpiece on that were channeling.
Yeah,
they are what we call the wilders. They're the ones that can innately channel without needing any help. And so they are leashed. They've got people controlling them behind them, standing there, telling them what to do and how to do it. So which is really interesting. So they don't like that. They are very much against Aes Sedai, and that will come out later on. Darmain, yes, thank you very much. The call, and I was curious about that too, Andreas, how they were going to. So in the books, they talk about them being collared, basically like a big choker that's got a chain or a length of cord that then links to a bracelet that the person behind them leads. It's almost like a dog, and they're treated like dogs essentially. They're collared.
Wow,
but they haven't done that in the series. They've got this sort of like a mouthpiece thing. So I'm curious to see how that'll go. But no, the Sanshin is a huge invading force. They're the ones that created that big tsunami at the end of episode 8. And then Lady Suroth is there, and then you've got Ishmael. The costumes, stunning, aren't they? They are incredibly thought-provoking and so unique to it.
It's why I say I think this show, if enough people can get into it and they've got the patience to learn, because the show doesn't really hold your hand on a lot of the stuff. Like if you didn't jump onto this podcast, like you added about 80% to my knowledge of what I knew coming into this thing just by having read the books. Like it really doesn't hold your hand, but there's enough even for me as a casual viewer to really enjoy the show.
And that's the point. And I think that's the thing. It's the story itself will hold up, but then the links to the story and using that having that depth there just helps, having those extra layers for those people that are fans of the books. I know it is hard. It is very hard, Andre. I hope I haven't said anything I shouldn't have said.
I don't feel like I know anything I shouldn't know after this. I really think you've kept it really good. Yeah.
And Ishmael spotting Lyle and Perrin too, clocking them sitting there down, which is another interesting. We'll see how that pans out in episode 3. My guess is episode 3 will have a bit more, but we shall see. And did you notice the nails? The Sanshin nails.
I saw
like,
that.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a clue there for everybody that watched the beginning of episode 1. But the last scene here that we're going to finish it off on is the Rand scene. The next day, he goes back to the asylum, the mental asylum, and he is now going to be the carer of the false dragon Logain. And he said, I think we've got a lot more in common than what you think. So clearly showing he knows exactly who this person was. There was this whole fight scene that broke out with this person who was picking on Errol. It makes you think that it wasn't just because he was picking on Errol that Rand maybe took him out. Like, because I thought it was all about that, when now it looks like Rand had a plan from the start to take that guy out so he could get close to Logain, which was very interesting.
Yeah, no, it never happened to Andre, but because there was no asylum. But like you say, really more layers.
Story-wise.
Because it just seemed like, man, he's giving the old guy a bit of grief, but it definitely wasn't worth beating into a pulp. But then when you realize that it got him entrance to Logain, great, is a really good character from the books. I like back in the day, back in the late 90s, there was a website that you could go on to, and there was like chat rooms and stuff you could talk about Wheel of Time. My username was Logain.
Well, so, aka Logain.
Just Logain Albar was my username. That was early on in the piece before he even had all his story out later on. But no, he's a really good character as well. So I'm really pleased to see Logain coming back, and I'm curious to see what they do with him.
Yeah, well, we're gonna see it all play out in the next 2 episodes. We'll be covering episodes 3 and 4 in our next live next weekend. So make sure to jump on again to see that as well. Andre Lee saying, is Logain taking another character's storyline? Probably is.
Time will tell.
Yeah, interesting.
They're going to need to do stuff like that.
Yeah, because there's so many characters. I don't think they can put everybody onto the show, right? And it's same with Game of Thrones. There were like whole areas of Game of Thrones that didn't even show us in the season, like characters that were left out.
There was a scene, but just really quickly before we finish, that was basically verbatim for the story for a chapter in the book. Was the one where they go across the water. Perrin and the group go across the water to the village.
Yes.
And that was very much a chapter completely pulled straight out of the book. Very authentic, very much. They came across the fence with the fade stabbed up and nailed to the wall alive,
crucified to the wall.
Yeah, and that's something that just shouldn't be able to be done, because we saw in that end of episode 1 how fast, how strong, and the fact that someone has managed to nail this fade to the wall while he's alive. Yeah, that's starting to allude to potential strength or danger of Padan Fain as well. But yeah, that was pretty much word for word, like blow for blow, how the book was. So that was exciting for me. I was like, oh man, this is great. But yes, Nightless, cool. Awesome. No spoilers, right. Andre.
I don't know anything about it. You could have spoken Maori to me and I wouldn't have known what that meant. But yeah, thank you everybody for watching this. This was the first time ever doing a different kind of show here on the channel. I actually had a lot of fun. I feel like, Will, you carried most of the conversation with your knowledge.
But my first time.
No, I think you did a brilliant job, mate. Like, you definitely gave a lot of people things to think about, and I think you helped build the world for a lot of us that don't actually we haven't read the books and we don't understand it to that level. And definitely, I couldn't have done this without anybody else. I'm really happy that you jumped on board to do this season with me. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and putting a like on this video. Comment below. What did you agree with? What did we miss? Try and keep it spoiler-free for us as well when you do make comments below. But the way that we know that you like this type of content, you want to see more of it in the future, is by you subscribing and liking these videos. So, but thank you so much here for everybody that was with us in the live. Andre Lee sticking it out right until the end, saying, awesome work, Will. We really appreciated it. And we will be back next week to talk about the next 2 episodes. So thank you so much. Have a good evening. Have a good afternoon or day, wherever you are in the world. And we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.